Well, we've taken a break from the pods for the past month or two, and after that marathon 23-24 rugby season, we needed it. But now the URC is less than a week away, and we're more than ready to get back to harping on rugby. Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to Harping on Rugby, where with the help of some fellow fans, I get to harp on what's going on with Leinster, Ireland, and the wider rugby world. Now, this is our 367th podcast overall, but more importantly, it's the first episode of our 6 seasons of pods. We were posting our first offerings back in 2019. Leinster were on a quest for a fifth star. South Africa were top of the Rugby Championship, and Welsh fans dreamed of joining the Premiership. So who says a podcast can't move the needle, eh? And it goes without saying that over the course of those 6 seasons, we've had some excellent contributions from dozens of fans, though some have appeared more than others. And we've developed a core group of my fellow Leinster nerds. So you'll be hearing quite a bit from them over the coming weeks and months. But for this opening pod, where we'll be looking ahead to the upcoming campaign for the Boys in Blue, I'll be getting some relatively fresh input, beginning with someone who's making just his third Harping appearance. Welcome back to Mr. David Cordial.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
Great to have you. You're basically the wily old harping veteran for this pod, as it turns out. So no pressure.
Good. No pressure felt.
Indeed. And also here is someone making his harping debut. If you follow Leinster and Ireland Rugby on X/Twitter, you'll definitely know his work. But he describes himself as a Dubliner in London, part-time history boy, part-time sports nerd. He is described as top billed by leading journalists. A warm harping and rugby welcome to Mr. Hugo Gordon.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you. Great to have you both. Okay, gents, let's get down to business. Leinster open away to Edinburgh on Friday evening. But before we turn our attention to that one fixture, we're going to take a more general look at our overall expectations of the province. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of clubs across the three main leagues would be more than happy with one season reaching a Champions Cup final and a domestic semi-final, let alone three. But starting with yourself, David, that's just not how anyone associated with Leinster can be thinking, is it?
No, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you choose to look at it, Leinster are now in the unenviable position of feeling like they really should be achieving multiple Champions Cups and actually having none to show. So, going into this season on the back of now I think it's three final losses in a row. And then we include the other one at the immediately after our last win, and Leinster are in a situation now where winning a Champions Cup final is the minimum when it comes to success for the season, which is an absolutely insane thing to have to say. The real goal for them this season, as I think it was last season, is to win the double. If they win the Champions Cup, it will be a good season, but they will not feel that they have achieved what they want to achieve unless they win the double. And for those of us really looking forward to the regular season, what that unfortunately means, listening to other podcasts than this one, is that wins just won't cut it anymore. Leinster will be in a situation where they are expected to win. And I think going into the regular season, particularly in the URC, the only thing that could cause a blip in Leinster's radar is that they could register a couple of wins on their South Africa tour. Outside of that, I think the expectation will be that they win basically every game they play in the regular season, and expectations will not be met until the business end. And like I said, that depending on how you look at it, that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, as a Leinster fan, I like to be operating at the high end of the season, but that is the high watermark that Leinster have set for themselves with their performances over the last few seasons, and it's what they're going to be aiming for in this one. So yeah, that's the unenviable position that Leinster find themselves in these days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to after we won in Bilbao, and the team came back to Dublin, and they had a presentation. The team had a presentation at Donnybrook, and Eason Nasewa got up and he said, "Listen, I'm not happy with today. I'm not happy with this just now. We're celebrating today, but this is a team that can go on and win." And he actually went to the extremes. It's almost Donald Trump kind of extremes. He said we could win 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 more championships down the line. I mean, that was the kind of feeling we were having when we had we had that team back then. And like you say, we've gotten to finals, but now it's a stage where there's literally almost nothing we can do between now and until May, really, that make it look like this is a successful season. That's a lot of pressure to put on any club, even one where the standards are as high as Leinster's. What do you think, Hugo?
Yeah, I mean, as David said, it feels insane to say that the minimum is a Champions Cup, but the reality is that we've been in three finals in a row with one of the most expensively compiled and talented squads in world rugby, and each time we've come up short. I mean, we're talking about 7 points at the 80-minute mark is what separates us from three straight European titles, and we haven't come away with any of them, which is hard to take, and in a way, kind of the very disappointing performances in the URC have kind of contributed to a sense that we just haven't really been able to get over the line. I mean, we've been reached three straight European finals, but we haven't reached a final now in the URC in 4 years. And all this has really led to this feeling that when it comes down to it, for all the talent in the team, for whatever reason, we're not able to get over the line. And I think the reality is, if Leinster don't come away with silverware, at the end of the season, URC at a minimum, but again, we really have to be looking at the European Cup again, then it is going to be seen as a disappointing season. It makes it a bit of a poison chalice. It feels, Leinster could achieve things that would make most teams view it as a very successful season this year, and the reality is it would be seen as a massive disappointment. That's a huge amount of pressure on the team. It's a huge amount of pressure on Leo Cullen, but it is unfortunately where we are.
Yeah, I mean, like we say, those are the standards we expect, and it's interesting. We touched on David touched on the South African tour. I mean, it's like, and the way the URC is developed, I mean, it's still an amazing competition, and it's really competitive. And where you finish on the ladder, even though the top team, I don't think the top team has won it yet, the team to finish is top, but that it still just shows how competitive it is, and you do need that kind of home advantage. So how Leinster go about that South African trip it could be key, and that could have cost us last season at least. But we already know going into this season that our South African trip is right after the 2025 Six Nations, so you can be guaranteed we're not bringing test players down there, whatever way the league stacks up. So we've got all that with the pressure and that fact that's going to hit us at the end of the Six Nations, wherever our standing in the league is. That's the kind of thing Leinster are up against. Now, I can't hear a lot of tears from coming outside of Leinster about that kind of pressure. But I'm just, amongst Leinster fans, I think it's important to just appreciate what we need to do. I mean, we do have those expectations. We do expect trophies at the end of the season. It's just that weight. I think we could literally have bonus point try wins every single game from now right up until the end of April, and it still won't mean a thing until we'll have learned more about the individual players. We'll talk more about individual players later, but it's just that's basically what we're up against, Okay, well, listen, that's just about enough on expectations. We're going to leave that there, and we're going to turn our attention to more specific aspects of the upcoming campaign. Now, before we push on, though, just a quick reminder of the different places you can find our Harping on Rugby content. Our main link has changed for the new season. If you've been bookmarking us, first of all, thanks for that. But also, we'd like you to change it to Linktree/Harping on Rugby. From there, you'll not only be able to get all of our latest pods, videos, and blogs, but also there's links to all our different social media platforms, and hopefully you can follow us on any or indeed all of them. Right. Well, we've spoken on the general aspirations for Leinster Rugby this season. Now let's focus on things more specific, namely some players we expect to crack on this season. We're going to let Hugo get the ball rolling this time. I believe you'd like to have a little chat about Mr. Sam Prendergast.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the kind of the players who really there's a huge amount of hype and expectation about them, Sam Prendergast really is kind of top of that list. Obviously, only his second senior season, but already a lot of talk about whether he should become Leinster's starting fly half by the end of this season. He played a lot of rugby last season for someone on their first year of their senior contract. That included interpros, that included European games, and I think it's very telling about the talent that he has. That there is already so much expectation about him. And there is an opportunity here, I think, for him to crack into the starting team, or at least the kind of starting 23. Obviously, Harry Byrne's performances towards the end of last season were a bit disappointing, and I'm sure Harry himself would be the first to say it. Ross Byrne, as kind of brilliant a general as he's been for Leinster. I think again the reality is we haven't quite been able to get over the line with him as 10, and so the kind of question then is, does Sam Prendergast manage to become the starting 10? There's also the presence of Kieran Frawley as well, who will have done his chances of becoming the starting fly half no harm with those drop goals against South Africa. But I think the fact that we've already seen Sam feature in so many big games already. We saw him score a brilliant try in the preseason game against Northampton. We've seen him turn down a loan move to Connacht, which shows that he expects to feature more prominently for Leinster this season. He has the talent. He's an exceptional player. My only concern, I think, is that there is so much pressure and so much of a spotlight on a player as young as he is so early on, and I just hope that doesn't prove to be too much, because the kind of his ceiling is so high, and it really is not remotely impossible that by the end of the season he is our go-to guy at number 10.
Yeah, I mean the Leinster 10 dilemma. It was a thing literally from the second we knew that Sexton was going to be leaving, but it just expanded with new players coming in. The likes of like Sam Prendergast, like you're talking about, but then of course, like you mentioned, that drop goal from Kieran Frawley. I mean, Frawley always says he wants to play 10. Then he shows that he can do that in a high pressure situation. I mean, we were looking at that. One of the first things I did after that second test was try to pick a Leinster starting 15, having to put both Frawley and Jamie Osborne into that team, because they both kind of played their way, saying, hey, if they're playing this well for Ireland, how could you not pick them for Leinster? So these are the kind of dilemmas we're in. On Sam, yeah, I mean, he's, it's not just a way of finding him in. It's when you watch him play. He made a couple of preseason appearances there, like you said, and he just play. He shows that kind of confidence on the ball, confidence with his body language and everything. The way he's confident in his choice, he's confident in his execution, and he throws the other team. He's sort of one step ahead of defense coming at him as well. He plays with the style. He's going to possibly play in such a way that when he gets his chances that they can't afford to leave him out, so there's a lot to look forward to from him. It's definitely, he played a lot, like you say, he played a lot more rugby last season than others might have at his age, and he'll be looking to do some more for sure. Okay, so now to yourself, David. You're going to have a look at the pack, namely Lee Barron.
Yeah, I've gone with Lee Barron. He's an interesting player in that I don't think he's necessarily at the top of anyone's list when it comes to these kind of discussions. He's I think currently listed as probably our fourth choice hooker, which seems fairly down the rankings. But for that, he's got 17 caps for Leinster. 10 of those came in the last season. Of those 10 caps, 6 of them were starts. I feel like he's already leapfrogged over John McKee, who is also a very, very good, very confrontational player. But in Lee Barron, I think I've seen every game he's ever played live. I've seen him play games in Donnybrook in Leinster's preseason. He is Dan Sheehan 2.0. He's 6'3". He is very quick. He has very nice hands. He's very good at positional play. He's good at getting on the end of passes and either dotting it down himself or getting that last pass in. And I think particularly with Sheehan's unfortunate injury, he'll be out at least until I think the Six Nations. And the fact that you have at least 2 hookers in every match day 23, although I think someone like Lee Barron, in the unlikely event that Leinster do need another back rower, could probably slot in there. I think this is a season where he's going to aim to at least match the number of caps he had last season. It's unlikely, I would say, that he's going to outpass Ronan Kelleher for that first slot in Sheehan's absence. But with the November internationals, with the Six Nations window, there's a lot of space for another hooker to take a step up. And for me, it has to be Barron, because he's only 23, which only puts him 2 years behind or 2 years younger than Sheehan, and he has everything that Dan Sheehan had at the same age and the same number of caps. This is I think it's laughable, honestly, the number of top class hookers that are coming through Leinster, and the age profile of them is completely enviable. But this guy, I think, in this season, with the test windows coming up in November and next year, with Sheehan's injury, this could be a huge year for a player who I think has the capacity to. He's definitely going to end up in a green jersey. I think the real question over the next few years is whether or not Leinster will be able to hold on to him.
Yeah, I mean that's sure, and it's like you say with the Sheehan long-term injury, you've got slots coming up in the Champions Cup pool stages as well, and we and like you say that we always have good quality hookers coming through. Gus McCarthy played well against Northampton there last week, and it's really good to see to have this kind of quality there, and like you say, with the internationals in this first block of games, it's a perfect opportunity for them to show what they can do, and he's probably there in the pole position for sure. Okay, well, for my part, I'm staying in the forwards for my choice, although I will admit I've also opted for a bit of help from another Harpin panelist, Coach Mark Jackson, to be precise. If you're listening, Mark, I hope you're well and that we'll be seeing you back on the pod very soon. So Mark has always been keen on the prospects of back rower James Culhane, and here's what he had to say in him, quote, injuries aside, he has the complete skill set, good leadership. He is captain of the Leinster senior side already. Great footwork and hands in contact and a very bright future. End of quote. To be honest, there's not a whole lot more I can add, but I would like to expand on that leadership angle. The captain's role is not something Leinster give out lightly. We have given it to young players in the past, but when you consider how the careers of the likes of Rhys Ruddock and Ross Maloney have gone since they were made young captains, you can appreciate what it tells us when it's Scott Penny, or in this case, James Culhane, for a second year in a row, was named skipper for Leinster in pre-season, giving us every reason to believe he'll be doing it more in future. James, of course, featured in the Irish under-20s Grand Slam winning side in 2022, and the only thing that could have come close to eclipsing his performances would be another top-quality number 8 breaking through since then, and guess what? Young lad from Tipperary called Brian Gleeson did just that, so things look really good for Ireland at this position for the future. Now, back at Leinster, he does have one or two lads who can play there ahead of him, just Caelan Doris, Jack Conan, and Max Deegan. But it's not like we haven't coped with that kind of depth before. Same as we were talking about with hookers and the out halves. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity for Culhane to make his name in the blue jersey, and maybe even more this season. Right. Well, there's loads of other players we could have chosen for this segment. And before we move up the subject of up and coming Irish players, I should note that we're recording this pod on September 15th, which is the anniversary of the tragedy that befell poor Nevin Spence and his family. He too had a bright future ahead of him, and the thoughts of the Irish rugby family and beyond are forever with the Spence family, and indeed all of Ulster Rugby at this time. Okay, well, we're talking about Leinster's chances for the upcoming season, and to do well, we also kind of have to consider the teams we're up against. So I've asked the lads to harp on some of the other contenders from the URC, starting with yourself, David, and you're going to have a quick look at the other provinces who no doubt are very keen to wrestle that Irish Shield office.
Oh yeah, I think it's even for more recent than us champions, Munster. I think that one still sticks in the craw. Particularly Ulster. I think last season will rue one or two opportunities haven't gone back against Leinster. But I'd say for each of the provinces, they all have ambitions. I'd say they're slightly different. For us, for Munster, having set the bar 2 years ago in down in Cape Town, for them it's going to be a repeat of last year. They're going to want to finish ideally top four. At least top four, ideally top two, and I think they prefer to finish top one. I think they particularly enjoyed wrestling that off Leinster. It's been, even in the absence of silverware, it's been a title that Leinster have held for quite a long time. So I think for them, they are now joining us in the situation of feeling like the goal for them for this season has to be to try and get silverware again. They've lost a lot of star power in the last season. They've lost RJ Snyman, they've lost Antoine Frisch, Joey Carberry, and Simon Zebo. But I think they still have enough strength and depth for that in that squad to compete at least for that top four finish. And once they're in there, there's a home quarterfinal, potential a home semi-final onwards for them from there. So for them, I think particularly for the longer the two Munster players, they will not want to be settling in for another 12-year wait for another trophy. It has to be for them the target for the next season. For Ulster, Richie Murphy has now been put on a 2-year full-time contract as head coach there. Dan McFarland had varying amounts of success over the seasons, but I think by the time he exited stage left, it had started to stagnate, and the attitudes up there seem to have soured. Richie Murphy seems like he's trying to bring a much more positive attitude up there. playing a lot more positive rugby. They do have a very tough Champions Cup pool. So there's a possibility that the focus for them will be on the URC. A top 8 finish at a minimum, top 4, I think for them will be the goal. Their squad has looked better on paper than it has in practice in past seasons. So for this season, I think for them, it's going to be matching the expectations that their player pool should set. I think the interesting one to watch for them will be their out half mix. They lost Billy Burns to Munster in the interim season, so they currently have 3 listed senior out halves, not including Mike Lowry, who can play there too. They have Jake Flannery, they have Dave Humphrey's son, and they have Aidan Morgan, I think it is, coming up from Super Rugby. Between them, those 3 players have less than 20 caps. So it's going to be a very interesting out half season for them. And in the academy, they have young Jack Murphy from last year's under-20s. So I think a home quarter final and more consistency over the course of the season is going to be what they're aiming for. And to back up those back-to-back wins that they got in against Leinster in the Interpros last season. For Connacht, I think it's consistency has to be the name of the game for Connacht. They have a star-studded backline, certainly, and I think for Connacht the frustration is just particularly in last season, was not getting to the knockouts. That had become a thing that a bar that they have now set for themselves. The Champions Cup is possibly slightly beyond their capacity if they're going to aim for the URC 2. So being in the Challenge Cup could in itself be an opportunity. If they can perform well enough in the pools there, they have struggled away to English teams, but if they can get a strong finish there, some home knockouts, they have every chance of going deep in that competition. They've signed well during the off season. They've got Josh Ioane, very promising young 10 up from Super Rugby, with JJ Hanrahan being out with the ACL until the new year at least. So between him and Jack Carty, Mac Hansen's back in the back 3. That's a huge boost. Santi Cordero playing very well in the Rugby Championship. Having him back is going to be a huge boost. They've also upgraded their stadium, so the capacity there will be big. I think that'll be a big boost for their usually very good crowds. So I think for them, the goal for this season has to be to get to the knockouts. Once they're in the knockouts, I think it's easy to forget how close they came, how hard they pushed in the semi-final in the season previous to last one. So I think for them, getting to the knockout stages, and I think more test reps. They have a lot of very promising players. They've got Cian Prendergast in the back row, the Murray brothers, and Joe Joyce in the second row. And I think pushing for those players, maybe a Cathal Ford, maybe even a Hugh Gavin, to be pushing into that Ireland picture. I think if they could get through that and get the best out of their admittedly very ferocious looking backline, I think that'd be a very positive season for Connacht.
Absolutely, and Sir Mac Hansen will almost feel like a new player as well. For him coming back, it's been great seeing him back in training as well. But yeah, no, there's been a lot of interesting changes at the other provinces. I mean, we talk about getting in Jordy Barrett and Somani and Snyman and whatever, but there's been a lot of interesting changes in coaches, and like Ulster, I'm expecting a lot from this Richie Murphy coaching ticket. Like you say, he does have some challenges in some positions, but there's always a good crop of talent up there as well. And you do see, you're already starting to see signs of his coaching style as we got towards the end of last season. But yeah, no, definitely a lot to look forward to from all the provinces. Well, when it comes to Hugo, I think it'd be kind of mean to ask you to look at all of the other 12 clubs. So maybe you can just have a quick look at maybe the 3 or 4 you consider to be the contenders from the rest.
Sure. I mean, so the obvious one, obviously, is the reigning champions, Glasgow. They've been a very solid side for the last few years, and while their win last year was probably not something that people necessarily expected from the outset, the reality was they were incredibly impressive all season and fully deserving winners. They've lost 1 or 2 players from that squad, most notably George Turner heading off to Japan, but actually they've kept together the core of that team very well. I think they have one of the best backlines in club rugby. You've got the likes of Sione Tuipulotu, Kyle Steyn, Hugh Jones. They are a deeply impressive side. And I think they will continue to be contenders again this season. They'll certainly be looking for a top 4 finish at the very least. You also have the runners up, the Bulls, something of a Leinster nemesis team, unfortunately, having knocked us out of 2 URC semi-finals now. I'm probably a little bit more pessimistic about the Bulls' chances. They were very impressive last year, but they have lost Kurtley Arendse who is also headed off to Japan. I think that's a major blow. He was one of their best players, if not their best player last season. They were hugely reliant on his pace for both their attacking and defensive setups, and I think they're really going to miss him. I also think there is a bit of a question about fly half for them and whether Johan Goosen is the guy who can finally take them to glory. But the reality is, we're talking about a team that has now been a finalist in 2 of the 3 URC seasons, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are back up there again. I think for me, the really interesting one is the Sharks. They have made some incredible signings over the summer, the likes of Trevor Niakane, Andre Esterhuizen. We have Sia Khaleesi coming back from Racing after a very large buyout of his contract there. And so you have a team that on paper is full of people who play for South Africa, full of incredibly talented Springboks. And that's adding to players like Etzebeth, who have arrived in the last couple of seasons as well. I think the one issue, I think, for the Sharks is they had a very good team on paper last season as well, and ended up being very disappointing. Their URC seasons so far have not been overly impressive. They've never really challenged for the title. They did win the Challenge Cup last year, and I think that was a real morale boost for them. But certainly, if you look at the team they have, there is absolutely no reason why they can't be thereabouts by the end of the season. And in fact, I think it would probably be a bit of a disappointment for them if they weren't, because I don't think any team is going to look forward to playing them, and particularly not look forward to playing them down in Durban.
Yeah, absolutely. There's there's loads of other teams in there, but those are definitely the top ones. All right. I mean, I noticed you didn't pick a Welsh team. I no, I listen. It's what we say about them is that we want the Welsh teams. We do want the Welsh teams to do well. We want them to be there in the mix. I mean, there's plenty of scope there for it, but of course, there's a lot going on over there. A lot, the fans and what's going on in the WRU and stuff. But the Ospreys did show some good sparks last season. They did play well at times, and you always do get a tough game against them. Of course, Leinster are starting against Edinburgh. They would definitely had a disappointing season by their standards last year for sure. They fell away in the second half, especially. So it's all about how they get off to a start. And of course, from the Italians, pretty much know what to expect from Zebra. But Benetton are never an easy team to go up against. So it's a fully competitive league. And of course, back to South Africans, you got the Lions. They're doing well in the Currie Cup at the moment. The teams are very similar, and the Stormers, they're the only team in this competition we're yet to beat at all. So there's loads of competition across the league, and lots to look forward to there for sure. So Leinster kick off their URC campaign this Friday evening against Edinburgh. And I've asked the lads to have a look at the available players to start the season and see what kind of match day 23 we could be naming this Thursday lunchtime. As you know, we've had a couple of preseason matches against Bordeaux and Northampton, which might have given us a sense of what way the coaches were thinking. We're going to do this in absolutely the worst possible way to select a matchday squad, with one guy choosing the forwards, another the backs, and the third naming a bench. Not exactly ideal for cohesion, but hey, it's all for a laugh anyway. So first, we're going to go to Hugo, who has selected a pack for us.
Yeah, so I actually think that Leinster are going to go very strong for this one. While we didn't do this last season with players still away for the World Cup, in previous seasons for the opening games, we have actually gone quite strong. There are only a few windows during the season where Leinster can actually play their full internationals, and that really comes right at the start of the season. There's a little bit of a break before the autumn window, and then after Christmas, really the internationals are away until the very tail end of the season. So I think we will use that opportunity that we have, and I think we will field a pretty much full strength team. So that means Porter and Furlong at prop. It means Ronan Kelleher at hooker, with Dan Sheehan still out injured. McCarthy and Ryan in the second row, and Baird, Van der Flair, and I would imagine Doris in the back row. Now, you're obviously never fully aware of kind of exactly how minutes are being managed post pre-season, kind of knocks, etc. Niggles picked up in camp, and I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw some mixing and matching from outside of that first choice 15. But broadly, I do think that we'll be going pretty much all guns blazing, get some minutes into players who've now had a couple of months off after the South Africa game, and hopefully start the season with a bang.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was wondering when they named. I mean, I would have before all of this, I would have thought we might go for like a more traditional September kind of Leinster lineup. But if that was the case, the way that when they announced Cleon Doris as captain last week, which I thought great choice, and it's perfect. It's a good way to resolve it. I think they handled it well. They've since had interviews with James Ryan, Gary Ringrose, and they've said, it was a lot of people to choose from, but I think they did, after the co-captains thing last season, I think it was the right choice in the end. But I thought it was interesting when they named Doris captain, because if you're going to make him the club captain, and then a couple of days later name a Leinster team with somebody else as captain, it'd be a strange dynamic. So it'd be interesting to see if they go that route for sure. David, who have you got for the back line?
In almost complete diametric opposition to Hugo, I'm operating on the assumption that this is not a choice thing for Leinster, that minutes being managed is very much Ira, if you dictate. Leinster are in kind of an unenviable position in the backline where the vast majority of our backline were represented either primarily in the South Africa tests or in the case of Hugo Keenan in the Olympics, which is even more recent. That said, I think they're going to start off as strong as they can. The word on the ground is that Jameson Gibson-Park is now back fully fit and firing, despite not featuring in the preseason. So I think if he's fit, he plays at 9. Ross Byrne, who played in the preseason, also missed out on the South Africa tour, but consequently, I would hope he will be available for us. As we advance through the backline, then, in the absence of those assumedly missing but potentially available internationals, 12 will be a very interesting one. There is not a clear and obvious choice at 12. In the preseason matches we went for, I think it was Charlie Tector and Ben Brownlee started in those two positions. Tector's an interesting one given I think he played twice in the entire last season. Seemed to be on the outs. I've gone with an outside choice, but I think there's a possibility it might actually be Harry Byrne.
Yep.
With Sam Prendergast taking up the well, sorry, I won't spoil that one yet. But I think there's a possibility to get, if you want to get your best players on the pitch, to deploy Harry at 12. 13 was an easier choice for me. I think it's going to be Liam Turner. He played there, I think, for both of the preseason games. He's a very promising player, former sevens man, very fast. Has slotted in at 13 for Leinster on a lot of occasions in the past, and I think will offer solidity. Relative solidity for someone as young as him in the centre. On the wings, I've gone with the two lads who played the preseason games, Rob Russell at 11 and Tommy O'Brien at 14. O'Brien in particular had a great season that was pockmarked with injury, and I think Leinster don't lose much by starting him on the wing. Rob Russell has been quietly, I think, Leinster's top try scorer for the last 2 seasons, certainly 2 seasons ago, and then last season I think he was drawn for. So he, for me, is a very obvious choice. And then fullback, there was a bit, I'm not entirely sure of the injury status. If he's fit, I think Jordan Larmour will slot in there. Given he was absent from the preseason games, I have included the caveat of if he isn't, we might actually drop as far back to academy player Andrew Osborne, who's the younger brother of Jamie and who represented well there in the preseason games. So a much lighter looking backline, but if the forward pack could be as strong as the one dictated by Hugo, that might not be an issue.
Yeah, it's very interesting lineup, so that definitely makes for an interesting lineup. We'd have the full strength pack, and full strength almost up to 10, you could say, because I mean, for all we're talking about selections, I mean, there's 2 things you have to deal with. Like, what team would you pick, and what team are they likely to go for? And I have a feeling, I got the impression from the selection preseason, Ross Byrne is in the front position for the 10 jersey, and he could have it to start the season all right. And and the back line, like Tommy O'Brien, we talk about people looking to crack on the season. I could have talked about him as well. He needs a full season with no injuries. He deserves it for sure. He's played so well preseason. Every time he's played, try saving tackles, all sorts. He could be a real headline star at this stage if he'd been fully fit the past 3 or 4 seasons. We hope for a good season from him.
I would just say as a final add-on, I think that the one player to watch, I know we said players to watch earlier, but in terms of that backline is Jamie Osborne.
Yeah.
After the the performances that he had in South Africa, and then the performance he had for Leinster in the previous season. If you look back at his team sheet, Gehring was injured for a lot of that season. He represented Leinster massively in the last season and then was just rewarded in South Africa. So I think the thing with Jamie Osborne is he's coming for someone's jersey. And I think it's really just a toss up between, is it going to be Robbie Henshaw's? Is it going to be Gary Rosen? Or, and this would have been blasphemy to say even 12 months ago, is it going to be Hugo Keenan's? But he's coming for somebody's jersey.
Yep, that's it. I mean, like we said earlier in the pod, I mean, after that South African test, Frawley and Osborne are just two names that, you look at you look at the players that are coming in. You got Jordy Barrett and all that stuff. You're trying to pick an ideal team for the Champions Cup. How can you not name those two players in the starting 15? You almost it's almost criminal to leave them out. But when you do that, you're leaving big names out, So it's like they say, it's a good dilemma to have, but it's just one. It'd be interesting to see how they resolve it. So I suppose that leaves the bench for me. It's given me some interesting choices there. Obviously, with Dan Sheehan unavailable, I suppose for all we were saying, we'd have to go Barron on the bench as hooker if Ronan is starting. The props are interesting. It'd be interesting to see what they do with Cian Healy this season. What is he going to play? Is he going to be sort of a switch hitter this season, or what way are they seeing him? But for this game, I'd have Milne probably at 17. I think we need to get Leinster games into Slimani, so I'd have him 18 to get to know our systems and stuff. For 19 on the bench, I think Deeney, we're not sure of the status of Brian Deeney. He went off injured early on against Northampton. So I'll put Conor Tierney for 19. And excuse me, they've listed Alex Soroka as a lock, I think, this season, but I'd like to see some minutes out of him, so he could be a contender for 20. On for the backs on the bench, I think we're talking a serious fight now. Luke McGrath, he's been our backup to Gibson Park the last couple of seasons, but I think Foley is coming for him big time. If he gets a good run of games under his belt, I'd like to see him in action as early on in the season. So if Gibson Park comes back, I'd love to see Luke. If Luke cracks on and plays well, that's fine. But I'd like to see a bit more Foley this season. So I'd have him as 21. Definitely Prendergast. If you've got Ross starting, definitely Prendergast at 22. And I'm going to put Mackerleen at 23, just to acknowledge the way he came on against Northampton, the way he played like someone he was literally putting his hand up and showing that he's got the attitude and the confidence the way he was playing as well. So and they do like to reward players they see doing well in preseason with slots. So I'm going to put him at 23. Okay, listen, that's our 23, and that's brilliant, lads. We're going to leave it there. Many thanks to David and Hugo for joining me, and hope you can come on back again soon, lads. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And as for our next bout of Harpin, we'll keep an eye on our YouTube channel for our weekly 80+ column where I look at the wider rugby world. That should be out on Wednesday. Then we'll turn our attention squarely onto Edinburgh v Leinster with a preview on Thursday. So make sure you're following us on all our social media channels. The links are in the program notes. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.